Another John Rowe impersonation. How are you all? It's very good to have you here. Thank you for coming. And tonight we've got somebody I have never heard tell children's tales yet. This will be my first time. I do remember one of your tales. I'm not saying the name yet, it's a surprise. I remember the one with the man who bought the bear skin. That one, that has stuck to my mind. It was a very nice story. So hopefully our guest tonight, our lovely storyteller, will give us more of that kind of stories that stick to the back of your brain and then you come to think of them again and again. So, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, I'm exactly like him, aren't I? And assembled company, welcome to our lovely Friday for Children. And together with us tonight is the lovely Shane Ibbs.
Thank you. I've just seen another friend of mine, James, which is lovely to see. Hello, James. Lovely to see you. So, yeah, so you say children's stories. Yeah, well, some stories are for adults or for children, I find. And if I'd argue, perhaps most stories are. But so, as Louis quite a mature young man these days, aren't you, Louis? Yeah, I know. It won't be long before you've got a beard. It won't be long before you've got a beard. Brilliant. Hello, Janet, too. Good to see you. Good to see you. Good to see you. Okay, so I thought I would share some winter stories. One will be a Christmas story, and the others are winter stories. Hopefully, if I can get through the stories that I would like to tell. And I thought I would start with an Inuit story. And the Inuit are a people that live in the very cold lands of Canada, as it's known now. They had a different name for it, of course. And they're a kind of a hunter, or were a hunter-gathering people. I'm sure they still are to some extent, actually. And their winters are really cold and really, really, really long. We don't know what a cold winter is compared to the Inuit people. And there was a tiny little village, a grouping of Inuit. And there was an old Inuit woman who lived alone. And she was too old to go hunting for herself for food. So the men of the village, they would go and do the hunting as they did in those times. And they would bring back maybe a seal or some fish if they were lucky, if they cut a hole in the ice and got some fish. Often it would be seal. And they would always cut a piece of meat and take it to the old lady and give it to the old lady to eat. And she was grateful for that. And in those times, the meat was eaten raw. I don't know if you could imagine that, Louis, eating your meat. Well, I'm assuming you eat meat, actually. You might not, but eating meat raw, I don't know if you could imagine what that's like. But anyway, for the Inuit people, it was very normal. There she was, late one afternoon. It was getting dark early, as it does. Minding her own business, probably away with her thoughts. And there was a knocking at her place where she lived. And she went, and there was a group of hunters from the village. Hello, she said, and hello, they said. And they looked at her and they said, we have a bear cub. And she looked at the hunters. They said, we made a mistake. We killed an adult bear, polar bear, which they didn't do very often, but sometimes they needed to for meat and for fur. And we didn't know it was a she bear, and we didn't know that she had a cub. It's something that they wouldn't normally do. And the old woman looked at the men and said, well, yeah, what do you expect me to do about that? It's a sad state of affairs. And as she spoke, the bear cub opened its eyes and looked at her. And the men said, we thought you might want to look after the cub. Well, she looked into those deep, dark, sweet eyes of that little bear cub, how could she say no? Gladly, she said. And she took that little bundle of white fur, took him inside. And the first thing she did is she got the pan on the fire, and she melted some blubber, some fat, and she fed that to the bear. For several days, she fed the bear melted blubber. Then she moved him on to raw meat. And whatever the hunters brought her, she would cut it in half, and she would give half to the cub, and she would eat half. And after they'd eaten, they would sit there in the evening, just cuddled up to each other, just enjoying each other's company. And the bear would nuzzle into the old woman, and the old woman would give him a little extra squeeze. Oh, she loved this little bear cub. And the bear cub loved this old lady. She was so sweet and warm and kind. Well, the weeks went on, and the bear cub started to get a little bit bigger. And she would give him ever larger cuts of the meat, and she would have a smaller piece of the meat. And on it went. And the bear cub got bigger and stronger. Now, she knew that the bear cub needed some exercise. The children were really curious about this cub. And she said, well, go out and play with them. Go out and play with the children. But whatever you do, don't get your claws out. We have to look after the children. The bears, well, bears could speak in those times, of course. I mean, some would say they still can. And this bear said, well, I will do nothing to harm the children. And the children would love playing with this polar bear. They would roll in the snow. They would run in the snow. They would lay on their backs and make snow angels. They had the best fun ever. The bear cub, week by week, got bigger and stronger. He became so strong that he was too strong to play with the children. They were afraid that he might hurt them. He didn't realize how strong he was. So the men began to play with the bear. They would, I say play, that you know what men are like, they want to wrestle and things like that. And they would wrestle this bear, and the bear would wrestle with them, and they would have a great time. And the bear got bigger and stronger. And they gave him a nickname. They called him the iceberg. He was so big and so strong. Well, as the months went on, he got stronger and stronger. And the men thought, we need to take him hunting. After all, a polar bear is an expert hunter. So they took the polar bear with them to hunt. And he was a good hunter. He caught many seals that were taken back for food, and their skin to be used, and their bones to be used, and what have we. Nothing was wasted. The bear became such a skillful hunter that the men thought, he's better than any of us. He's stronger than any of us. And they worried about this bear, but the bear was friendly. He was good. He treated these people really well. Now, further up the huge lake, there was another group of Inuit, a smaller group, a band of hunters. And one of these hunters, the lead man, didn't respect and follow the code for respecting the animals and nature. He was one of those men who you might call a trophy hunter. And he heard about the bear, the iceberg bear. And he thought, I would love to have him as a trophy. And he said, he let it be known that if he ever came across the bear, that he would take the bear's life. Word got around. A young child in the village heard what the hunter had said he would do. And he went to the old lady, this young lad, and he told the old lady what he'd heard about this hunter. And the old lady knew The bear couldn't stay with her forever. He was a wild creature. He would have to return to the wild, and he would be in danger for his life. She sat the bear down one day, one evening, and they were chatting after they'd eaten their fish. And she said, soon you will have to leave me, and you will have to go north, very far north. Let me show you something. And she opened her door and she looked up at the sky and she said, look at those stars there. Can you see that constellation of stars? That's the big bear. He lived long ago. He was a bear like you. He was big and strong. And the hunters came and they took him. They took his life. And his spirit went up into the sky. And he's now a constellation of stars. And can you see that bright star? That's the North Star. You must follow that star to get as far north as you possibly can. And there you will be safe, for man cannot live in the very far north. It is too cold for him. The day came when Bear had to leave. The old woman said, this is the day you will leave me, and I will not see you again. Let me take you to the edge of the village. And she took the bear to the edge of the village. She said, I want to hug you. You've been like a child to me. And she gave the big bear a lovely, warm hug that only a grandma or a mother can give. And there was a tear in her eye. And I don't know if polar bears cry, but his eyes were watery, I know that. And the polar bear was about to leave, and then the old lady remembered something. I need to know that you are safe. I need something so I can identify you. She went back to her house. She got a pestle and mortar. She got some soot from the fire. She got some whale oil and she ground it up into a paste. And she went back out with a brush. She stuck it in that mixture and she made a black mark on the haunches of the polar bear. She said, if people see you, I will know it's you for this mark. And the polar bear began to walk away and he stopped. And he turned and he looked at the old lady one last time and kind of, and then he was gone. And he followed that northern star and he went very far north to the place where no man goes, where bears, polar bears are safe. But as the weeks went past, the old woman wondered about the bear. She wanted to know how he was. She would ask the hunters when they came back, have you seen the bear? We haven't seen him. More weeks passed. Have you seen the bear? We haven't seen him. And she thought that maybe he was gone. Maybe the hunter had found him. The hunter from that further place. Many months later, the hunters came back and they came to her door and she could hear some commotion outside, and she went to the door and they said, it is good news. We have seen the bear. And she said, how do you know? And they said, he has the black mark that you put on his back legs. Ah, that is him. Ah. And she spent the rest of her days happy, knowing that the bear was safe. And that's the story of the old lady and the polar bear cub. Thank you. Thank you. Ah, now I can see, oh, there they are. I can see I've got some relatives that are going to join. Hi. I look like I've got a bit of a turban on, I think, here, but it's my part-time job as Santa Claus. Not really, children, just joking. So that was a story from the Inuit people, and I want to tell you a story that comes from the British Isles, and it's what we call a myth. And for people who don't know what a myth is, it's like a story, but it comes from way, way, way back when all the animals could speak. And years didn't pass in like years and decades, tens of years. Years happened in hundreds of years. So a creature could live for hundreds of years. That's kind of what happens in a myth. And some people say this story comes from Scotland. Others say it comes from Ireland. The fact that they share some of the language adds to the confusion. I'm not going to decide where it comes from, but I'll tell you the story. There was a morning after a frosty, cold night, and there was a she golden eagle in a nest. She'd plumped up all those beautiful golden feathers to insulate her body, and amongst those golden feathers were grey feathers, for she was old. She was so old. And she shook herself and she looked out from her nest across the glens, and she could see everywhere the snow laid, and it was sparkling and twinkling, for there had been a deep frost the night before. And she thought to herself, surely that was the coldest night that there's ever been. And then she got to wondering. She knew she'd lived a long time, and she wondered, is it the coldest night? And she decided to find out. And she thought about what to do, and she thought, I know of a stag on Ben Bulben, that mountain. I will ask him. He will know. And she lifted up those huge wings that an eagle has, and she took off and she went higher and higher and higher, and she caught the wind, and with just one flap of those large wings, she soared down the glen, looking down over all the land that was sparkling and shining with the frost. The burns were frozen over, the larger rivers had ice on the edges of them, they were gradually closing over with the ice. It was surely the coldest night, she thought. And she flew on, and she flew over to Ben Bulben. And this was a time when the land was covered in forest. And she knew all the creatures would be in the forest where it's just that little bit warmer. And she flew around, and she flew around the top of Ben Bulben. And then she saw him, the black-footed stag, so old that his antlers were large and crumpled and laying back almost on his shoulders. They were so large and so heavy. And she flew down and she landed beside him. And she said, the eagle said, how old are you? And the stag looked at her. Do you see this worn oak stump, this huge stump that's worn and shiny? I've been coming here to clean my antlers and to scratch my skin all my life. My mother showed me this tree when it was a sapling, just a tiny little oak sapling. And it grew for hundreds and hundreds of years. And every year I come here to clean my antlers and scratch my skin. And I've worn the tree down to the stump that you see now. That's how long I have been here. And the eagle said, then you may know. Tell me, was last night the coldest night you've ever known? And the stag thought. And he said, there is one older than I who could answer this question. Who is that? Said the eagle. The blackbird of Conflirt. He will know. And the eagle thanked the stag, and off the eagle went once again. She went up and she went up and up and up. One flap of those big wings and off she was again, down another glen and across. She followed the river to Conflirt. And there was a place where her blacksmith had worked. but no longer. It was long ago when the blacksmith worked there. It was a time when he made swords and spears. All that remained was fallen in stone of the smithery and an anvil that was still there, what was left of it. And the eagle looked around, and suddenly a tiny blackbird came in and landed on the anvil where the blacksmith worked with his hammer to flatten the metal to make swords and spears, or had done. The eagle said to the blackbird, "Tell me, before I ask you a question, how old are you?" The blackbird looked and said, "Do you see this anvil? It is now just a sliver of metal. Once it was a large lump of iron. I have been cleaning my beak on this and sharpening my beak all my life. I have worn it down to a sliver of metal. That's how old I am." "That's old," said the eagle. "Tell me, have you ever known a night as cold as last night?" And the blackbird thought, there is one who would truly know, who is older than I, the salmon of Assaro. He will know. And with that, the eagle took off, thanked him, and took off once again, flying across those glens, those mountains, sparkling and glistening, the burns frozen everywhere. The land was locked in ice and snow, but it was absolutely beautiful, but bitterly cold. And the eagle came to the place where there's a waterfall and a pool of water. And there's a rowan tree that grows there. And that rowan tree has grown there forever, forever dropping its berries into the pool of water. And the eagle landed and waited. And quite soon, there was a rippling in the water. She could see this large, silvery fish that came, and its head came out of the water. One eye was missing. The other eye was milky and cloudy with age. And the eagle said, "Are you the salmon of Assaro?" "I am," said the salmon. The eagle said, "Tell me, I have a question for you, but before I ask, how old are you?" Said the salmon. "I was here when the world was flooded. I was here when the Tuatha Danann roamed Ireland. I have been here a very long time." "Then tell me," said the eagle, "last night was a cold night. Is it the coldest night that you've ever known?" And the salmon thought, there was one night colder. I remember it well. I was a young salmon with blood hot and warm in my body. I was full of life. And one day I sprung out of the pool as us salmons do. And in midair, the ice came and froze the pool. And I landed on top of the ice and I couldn't get back in the pool. And there was a crow. And the crow thought I was dead. And crows do what crows do. The first thing they take is an eye. And he pecked out my eye. And the warm blood flowed from my eye onto the ice, melted the ice, and I was able to get back into the pool for safety. That was the coldest night. The eagle thanked the salmon and flew back to her nest in the knowledge that indeed last night was not the coldest night. Thank you. So, how are you doing, Louis? How are you doing? You're good, are you?
I'm good, thank you. And how are you?
I'm very good. I'm very good. Are you going swimming tonight?
No,
Okay. Oh, change of plan.
because it's finished for Christmas time.
Ah, okay. You're right. It's why I'm wearing my hat, Louis. It's nearly Christmas, isn't it? It is indeed. So let's tell you. Would you like a more Christmassy type story, Louis? Give me the thumbs up.
Yes, I will.
Okay. Let's give you a more Christmassy kind of story. Something that happened near and around Christmas. If you know what a scarecrow is, could you put your thumb up? You know what a scarecrow is? Most people, it looks like everybody does. Well, this is a story on Christmas Eve about a scarecrow. There he stood in the field with his arms up. He had an battered old straw hat that probably belonged to Janet once upon a time. He had a raggedy old jacket that was too big and baggy and tatty that probably belonged to a bloke there called Carl Ibbs. And he had a baggy old pair of trousers that probably belonged to probably Peter or Norman, looking at the state they were in. And he just hung there, this scarecrow, absolutely bored. Because all the birds that had been around in the summer, that he'd been shooing away and chasing away from the crops and the corn, they had all left for somewhere warmer. Mr. Fox had gone into his burrow. Badger had gone into his burrow. That all the creatures were sensible, a bit like you here, that they had gone somewhere much warmer for the winter. And poor old Scarecrow was just there all day and all night, freezing cold, absolutely bored. There was nothing to look at, just fields of snow and ice and bare trees. And he became so bored that he began to feel lonely and a little bit melancholy, a little bit sad. And he was just feeling so fed up. And there he was, just his arms out, full of newspaper and straw and whatever else we poke into scarecrows to make scarecrows. And suddenly a hare, a bit like a rabbit, but with long ears and long legs, came lolloping across. And he stopped at the scarecrow. And he said to the scarecrow, "You look really bored, Scarecrow." And he said, "I am. I'm so bored. I'm really fed up. And truth be known, I'm feeling a bit sad, actually. I'm lonely." Well, there they were having a chat, and Hare was saying, "Well, that's terrible. Maybe I could come and visit you another day or something and have a chat." And they're chatting away. And from out of the wood nearby came a little woodland fairy. She came just skipping across the field. And she saw the Scarecrow and the Hare, and she walked over to them. And she said to the Scarecrow, "You don't look very happy." He said, "Well, would you? If you were stuck out here all day in the freezing cold with no one to talk to, day after 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 day, it's boring. It's lonely." And the fairy looked at him and she said, "I would like to give you a wish. If you had one wish, I wonder what you would wish for, Louis. What would you wish for if you had one wish?" What do you think?
Maybe a dog?
Maybe what?
A dog?
Ah, very nice. Well, Scarecrow thought maybe a dog that could keep him company. But do you know what he wanted? I'll tell you what he wanted, Louis. The Scarecrow said, "What I would really like, Fairy, is I would like to spend Christmas Eve with a family on Christmas Eve." And the Fairy said, "So be it." And with a swish of a wand, suddenly the Scarecrow could feel like he had flesh and bones and he wasn't made of straw and newspaper. And he hopped off his little perch that he was on. And suddenly he said, "Oh, I can move." He said, "Look, I can move like a human." And he started to have a little dance. He said, "Oh, this is fantastic. It means I can race across the fields and I can go to the farmer's house and I can listen to the family there. And I can listen to them singing." And he was just about to run off across the fields. And the fairy said, Stop. She said, "There's one thing." And he said, "What's that?" She said, "Whatever you do, you mustn't speak. For if you speak, you will break the spell." "I won't speak. I won't speak," said the Scarecrow. "I wouldn't do that. I'll just go and I'll watch and I'll just enjoy the singing. And I can hear the music across the field. I'll just enjoy it," he said. "Be sure you don't speak," said the fairy. And off the Scarecrow went. He went racing across the fields, racing across the fields. He went to the big farmhouse, and outside was a bench. And he sat down on the bench, just listening to the music inside and singing. There was a father, the farmer, and he was playing a violin, and mother was up with the children, the daughter and the son, and they were dancing and dancing and dancing. They were singing carols, and the Scarecrow sat there thinking, this is absolutely wonderful. I'd love to be inside. And he looked up at the stars and he could see the stars. He probably saw that big bear, actually, constellation of stars. He looked at all the stars, and Jack Frost was about, and it nipped his nose and his toes and his fingers, but still he enjoyed himself because it was such a crisp, beautiful night. Well, suddenly the music stopped. Father, he needed a smoke of his pipe. He needed a break. He'd been playing the violin for quite a while, and he said, I'm just going out for a little smoke, children. He got his pipe. He went to the front door, opened the front door, and he put a little bit of tobacco in his pipe, and he kind of lit his pipe. Don't do this at home, children. And he was smoking his pipe. And he looked, and suddenly he saw the Scarecrow beside him, and he didn't know he was in. He was like, whoa, whoa, that made me jump. He thought, well, how did the Scarecrow get here? And he thought, oh, I bet the children dragged him across the field and put him here just to play a trick on me to make me jump. There he is, kind of chatting to this Scarecrow. He had no idea that the Scarecrow could hear everything and see everything. The children inside could hear their dad talking to somebody or something, and they thought, who's he talking to? We're in a farm in the middle of nowhere. So they went to the front door. They said, who are you talking to, Dad? And he said, oh, silly old me. He said, I'm talking to this Scarecrow. He said that I think the children from the village have dragged him across the field, plonked him here just to play a little trick on us for Christmas. And I found myself chatting to him. And the children said, well, bring him inside, Dad. Well, I'm not bringing him inside. He said, look at the state of him. He's more of a mess than Norman. Look at him. He said, look at his raggedy, taggedy clothes. His hair is everywhere. Look at his beard. He said, I'm not bringing him in. And the children said, oh, Dad, come on. Dad. Oh, come on, Dad. You know this one, don't you, Carl? Or Granddad. Dad, Granddad, can I? You know, if you keep going long enough, kids, you will get what you want. They will give in. Well, Dad gave in because he was a decent kind of dad. And he picked the Scarecrow up and he brought him into the house and he sat him down on a chair. He picked up his violin and he began to play again. And he played a slow jig, and the children were just kind of dancing with mother, the son and daughter dancing with mother. And then he played a fast jig and they were kind of whirling around. And the Scarecrow, well, it was such good music. He began to tap his feet to the music. He began to tap his feet to the music. He began to tap, and he started slapping his side. And before he knew it, he stood up. He grabbed the little boy's hand, he grabbed the little girl's hand, and he joined him. And there he was, spinning around and dancing with mother and the little boy and the little girl. And he had a wonderful dance. It was fantastic. And when it came to an end, the Scarecrow said, that was wonderful. But oh dear, he'd spoken. And he just crumpled on the floor, back to being straw and newspaper and raggedy-taggedy clothes and a rough old straw hat that Janet didn't want anymore. And he just laid there in a pool of kind of clothing and newspapers and straw and what have we. And they all went, oh dear. And Father picked him up and put him back on the chair, and he thought, well, we'll carry on. And they carried on singing. And what they didn't know is the Scarecrow couldn't speak anymore, but he could still see and he could still hear. And they carried on singing and dancing and having a wonderful, cheery, happy evening. And the Scarecrow thoroughly enjoyed himself. And then, as you know, folks, bear this in mind, Christmas Eve, you have to get to bed quite early and go to sleep, Cara, because if you don't, Father Christmas won't come. You know this, don't you, Peter? Father Christmas won't. Yeah, I'm talking to you. If you don't go to sleep nice and early properly, if Father Christmas, you've got to be good children and go to sleep, or good adults and go to sleep. Well, anyway, it was time for the children to go to bed. Father said, right, well, I'm just going to put Scarecrow back out in the field now where he belongs. And they said, no, you can't do that, Dad. No. You can't put him back in the field, Dad. Put him in the barn until spring. Oh, what a good idea, said Father. He said, I think I'll do that. And the children went upstairs and they were watching from their bedroom window. And Father, he picked up the Scarecrow and he walked him across the yard into the barn, laid him down on some straw. And this silly old farmer, he found himself talking to the Scarecrow again because he didn't know the Scarecrow could hear him. And he said to the scarecrow, when spring comes and all your friends come back, I'll put you out in the field for the spring and the summer. And I promise you, in the winter, on Christmas Eve, I'll bring you back and you can come in the house again and enjoy a lovely Christmas Eve. And the farmer, he laughed. He said, listen to me. He said, I'm a grown man and I'm talking to the scarecrow like he's real. Well, he went out the barn, he closed the barn door and he went back in. Had he stopped and looked in that tiny little glass window in the barn door and looked inside, he would have seen a scarecrow with the biggest smile that you ever did see. And that's the true story of the scarecrow. Oh, I think I'm getting a woo from Louis. Thank you, Louis. That's very kind of you. Yes, it's one of my favorite stories, Louis. I love it so much. I can see the scarecrow. I feel like I know the scarecrow. I've probably been caught talking to the scarecrow. Yeah, it's a lovely story. So I'm just looking at my list of stories and thinking of what story will I tell you next. And I want to share another winter story from a land, well, quite far away, but in some ways the land might be a bit like Scotland. If we go to Canada, North Canada, kind of some people say the landscape is a little bit similar to Scotland. What do you think, Cara? Do you think it is? Yeah, yeah. Well, this is a story from long ago, from the people called the Cree Nation. It's a very old story. And when I did the research, I found what I didn't know is that the Cree separated into 3 distinct groups. And one group stayed very north, and the others moved a little bit further south around the wooded area and around the rivers and lakes. This story comes from the northern part of the Cree Nation, as it was. And it was winter, because we're telling winter stories. It was winter. And there was a mother and a father and a young girl, maybe about 8 years of age. And there she was in the middle of their teepee on an animal skin of fur with another one over her to keep her warm, even though there was a fire. And she was ill, very ill. She was running a fever and she was hot and perspiring. And if they took the skin down to cool her down, she would get really, really cold. And then she would become very, very hot. And then sometimes they would need to put the skin back on her to keep her warm, and she was just in some sort of delirium, kind of not really in the room, Louis. She was just kind of in and out of sleep. She was so unwell. The mother would put a cold flannel on her forehead to cool her down when she needed cooling down. They tried to feed her. She wouldn't eat anything. She would take a little bit of water on her lips just to moisten her mouth. She wasn't good. And they were afraid of what might happen to her. And they thought, we need the medicine woman. She will know what to do with her. We summoned the medicine woman. And they asked the medicine woman to come, and she came. And she was an old lady, a really short, small lady with skin that looked like, well, old paper. And it was wrinkly. But her eyes were so bright blue and sparkly. And she had the sweetest nature. You could feel that nature coming off her. She was so sweet. And her name was Duck Egg. I don't know why they called her Duck Egg, but that was her name. And she came in. And they said, the child, she is so ill. We've done everything. We don't know what to do. Can you help? And Duck Egg said, I will do my best. I will do my best. And she bent down, Duck Egg. She knelt down beside the child and she put her ear onto the child's chest and she listened to the child. And the child coughed. And what Duck Egg could hear was, she listened more. And Duck Egg said, I can see a she fox, an Arctic fox. She is running. She is weak. And she is breaking through the snow, the crust of the snow. And she sat up. And she looked at the father, who was a hunter. And she said, we need the fox here. Do you think you can hunt the fox and bring her here, alive? And the hunter said, I am sure I can do that. I know this land very well. And Duck Egg said, please go and bring the fox here. Well, the father, he put on his winter clothing, his thick fur skins and his muckluck boots. And he stepped into his snowshoes. Those look a bit like tennis rackets, so that he didn't sink into the snow. He put those onto his feet. He took a bag with some dried fish in and a little water, and out he went. And he walked to try and find the trail of the fox. Duck Egg listened more to the child, and she put an ear to her chest. And the child coughed. And Duck Egg could hear as the fox was breaking through the crust of the snow. Her feet were sinking in. She was getting more and more tired. Well, eventually the hunter, being the good hunter that he was, he picked up the trail of the fox, and he could tell it was her. He could see the paw prints that had broken through. He could see the trail of the tail, and he followed her, and he began to follow. Well, daylight goes quickly in that land in the winter, and he knew he needed to find somewhere safe for the evening to sleep. And he found a little place around a tree, and he set himself up and got a little fire going, a little flint and steel, and he got himself a little fire to have a little warm. And he ate some dried fish and had a drink. And he sat there just looking at this little fire. And then he looked up and out. And there were two bright red eyes watching him. It was the fox. She was in the distance, sitting there watching him. Eventually he fell asleep. He woke in the morning. He couldn't see the fox. He got his bits and pieces ready, and he began to follow the trail once more. Back in the teepee, Duck Egg listened to the child once again and said, your father is on the trail. The fox is getting weaker and weaker. She hasn't eaten for so long, but he is on the trail of her. It won't be long. And quite soon he caught up, and he began to see the fox. And he could see that she was weakening and weakening, and she weakened so much that she just laid down. And he came to where the fox was. And the fox looked up at him as if to say, oh, go on then, kill me. And he looked at the fox and he said, I'm not here to kill you. I'm not here to harm you. I need you for my daughter. And he bent down and he picked up the fox. And he could feel her ribs. She was so skinny and hungry and cold. And he hugged her close to him. And he walked for a day and a night all the way back to the teepee. And he went in with the fox. And Duck Egg said, oh, good. Put the fox beside the child. And he put the fox beside the child. And the child just stirred a little and put a hand out to feel the fox. And she could feel the fox. And then Duck Egg said to the hunter, get some fresh meat, plenty of fresh meat. Give it to the fox. And he went and fetched some meat. And the fox ate this meat. Get some more, said Duck Egg. And he went and got some more. And the fox ate some more of this meat. And then, well, the fox fell asleep beside the girl. The girl was back into that place of deep dreaming. Duck Egg sat there, knelt there, mother, father, and they just waited all through the night. In the morning, they were awoken by the fox standing up. Duck Egg woke and said, get some more meat for her. The father went and brought some more meat through, and the fox ate that meat. And then the fox went to the flap of the tent and was allowed out. And she began to walk away. And then they heard the stirring of the girl, and she sat up. And then they helped her up, and she was standing up. The illness gone. And she went to the flap and she looked out at the girl, and she saw the fox as she went off on her way. And the old woman Duck Egg, she looked at the mother. She could see the look on the mother's face. And she said to the mother, answer me this question. Perhaps you can. Did the fox cure the girl, or did the girl cure the fox? Thank you. Ah.
What lovely stories we've had. We've had bears, we've had stags, we've had foxes, and we've even had a scarecrow to accompany them all. How lovely. It's been a great night. I'm sure everybody here had a good time. Yeah, let's give a round of applause. Yeah.
Thank you.
Wonderful.
Well done, well done.
Thank you, Carl. Thank you, Corinne.
So just to make sure that people know what I'm telling them, you should know that what's coming up. Next Tuesday at 4 p.m. UK time, we have Young International Tellers. So if you have any young tellers, be them international or national, please bring them along and let them share some tales. And if you would like to encourage our young tellers, you can also be there. So we make sure that they know how much we appreciate their telling. Other than that, next Friday, for the first time at World Storytelling Cafe, we're going to have a dear friend. I don't know where in the world she's going to be connecting from, if she's going to be in the UK or in India, but Maya Ganatra is going to give us tales. She was going to be here earlier, but she had this little cold and she couldn't speak. So now is your chance to catch some lovely tales from a girl with one of the girls with the warmest hearts I've met so far.
She's lovely. She's a lovely storyteller too. I met her earlier in the year in Gloucester. She's lovely. She's
a lovely girl and a lovely teller. So yeah. I think that's all for the moment. We don't have any other story round for this year. Next one is going to be in January. So for the time being, let us all put our hands together for Shane, and thank you for a wonderful evening of tales, Shane.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you. That was really good. Yeah. Good fun. It was.
And it's so nice for me because I've got Norman, who I know from Canada's here, and some other friends here, you know, Cara from Scotland, Peter from Essex, Janet from, I don't know where you live, Janet.
Staffordshire.
Yes, and I've got my brother and his wife from France, so it's very international. And I don't know how to say your name. Is it Mathilde?
Mathilde.
Mathilde.
Oh. Yeah, that's correct. I'm Mathilde from Germany.
Ah, so and James, of course, I've forgotten. I haven't got his picture there. But James. So it's really nice that you've all come from different parts of the world as well, and different parts of the UK. It's lovely. Thank you so much, and thank you, Louis, once again for coming along.
Thank you, so thank you.
It's always good to see you, Louis.
You too, John. I mean, no, I'm not saying.
Have you got a bit of a cold, Louis?
No. Yes.
Yes. Okay. Yes.
Yes, I do. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I hope it gets better quite soon.
Thanks, mate.
Yeah.
I think,
I'll be back next week. I'll be back next week.
Okay.
So-
you'll
Good.
be good enough for Christmas, Louis, for sure.
Yeah. Yeah.
Thank
It could have been the fox. The fox tailed God to you, didn't it, Louis? Come on, you can confess. We know you're a very manly man, but I know that you also get moved from tails pretty often.
Yeah.
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 And we should comment on Peter's wonderful sweater, should we not? This
We,
is so
we
pretty and
should.
Christmassy.
It's very kind of you. Very
Hello.
C'est quand en France, tu crois, pour le pullover?
I don't know.
Can you hear me, Shane?
Yes, sure, yeah.
Yeah, it's the National Horrible Jumper Day in France today. I don't know if it's worldwide. No, it really is. Your mate, though, I don't know what his name is that you just said, the person who showed his jumper, but he might have been able to win.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Peter's is he's a smart man, Peter. He wouldn't have a terrible jumper, Peter. Too smart.
But it really is on the TV all day long, and in the shops, people have got horrible jumpers on. Not horrible, but strange.
Yes. Get crazy jumper, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
I like
Must
to
be something French, but it should be worldwide. Sounds lovely.
there
Yeah,
is a worldwide, at least North America. I know that US they have a tradition closer to Christmas. I like to think of them as horrible and memorable.
Fair enough.
So I'm interested, just while we're still on a little bit, I'm interested, Cara, do you know the story of the coldest night?
I do know the story of the coldest night, yes, so
Very
it's lovely to
convincing,
hear it being told. As to whether it's Scottish or Irish, I mean, as Scots, clearly we're going to lay claim to things, but I think it can be equally claimed by both countries, I would imagine.
Yeah, I mean, apparently it's Celtic. I don't know how true that is, but apparently it's got Celtic roots, which probably would cover both lands anyway. And
Yeah,
Well,
definitely.
look, Shane, what you do is when you share this story with Cara or Rona or Michael Carins, you make it sound Scottish.
yes,
If you're on the other side, you're with Liz Beer, you make it sound Irish, yeah? So
yeah,
everybody-
that's very true. That's very true.
Have you got your kilt on, Shane?
Not tonight. Not tonight.
Thank goodness for that. Bit cold out there.
Well, I'd say to any man, try a kilt. It's very refreshing, actually. Louis laughing. As a good friend of mine, he called it a skilt, which is a cross between a skirt and a kilt.
That's not bad. Right?
He thought he was being funny, and I have to say I did laugh, actually.
Shane looks very smart in his kilt, actually.
Thank you, Peter.
No, utility kilts are all the rage.
Yeah.
Very useful item.
Yeah.
Yeah. More ways than one.
Okay. So, well, thanks ever so much for coming along, everybody. It's been great. I've enjoyed myself.
Good.
That's good. Yeah.
So thank you, Shane. It's good to hear all the stories. And until we get to share in the same space again.
Yeah, that'd be nice. I look forward to that, Norman. Yeah.
Mhm.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye, Louis. Bye-bye. Bye-bye, everybody.